1858, Louisiana. The child found living alone. Beneath the plantation house, in the oppressive heat of antebellum Louisiana, a child is discovered living alone beneath the decaying walls of the Belle Rive plantation. As the secrets of the estate unravel, long-buried sins emerge, lies, betrayals, and unspeakable acts of cruelty. One detective, drawn into a web of hatred and revenge, will confront a darkness that threatens to consume every soul tied to the land. Chapter 1. The Discovery. The air above Belle Rive plantation hung thick with the scent of moss and rot, a suffocating perfume that clung to the Spanish moss draped from the oaks. It was early September of 1858, and the Louisiana heat pressed down like a heavy fist, making the wooden floors groan beneath each step. The plantation had been abandoned for months, yet a single light flickered faintly in the basement, unseen by most who dared approach. Sheriff Auguste Lemaire approached cautiously, his boots sinking into the mud along the overgrown path. Whispers of the supernatural had kept the curious away, but a neighbor had reported faint cries echoing from below. Auguste, a man of rational mind, dismissed specters and poltergeists, but curiosity and duty compelled him forward. He pushed aside a rotting shutter, the hinges screaming in protest. Below, the darkness swallowed the beam of his lantern. The scent of mildew and decay was overwhelming, yet something else lingered, a faint sweetness, like sugar and fear. And then he saw it. A small form crouched behind the support beams, eyes wide, hair matted with grime. The child's gaze was feral, yet unbroken, as though he had survived years alone in that suffocating silence. "Hello there," Auguste whispered, keeping his voice calm. The child flinched, but did not flee. He held a ragged doll, its face torn, as if it were a companion and shield both. Auguste knelt slowly, noting the boy's thin frame, the calluses on his small hands. How had he endured? How had anyone survived here, alone beneath this vast plantation? The child did not speak, only pointed toward a tangle of roots and a hollowed floorboard. Auguste pried it open carefully. Beneath he found scraps of paper, charred photographs, and a small journal, its pages brittle and etched in a child's careful hand. Each page whispered of life once lived above ground, life of opulence, of secrecy, and perhaps of terror. Footsteps echoed above, the plantation groaning as though it too knew its sins had been unearthed. Auguste's lantern flickered, and for a heartbeat he thought he saw shadows shifting, as if the house itself were watching, waiting. The boy's eyes were suddenly wide with terror, and he clutched Auguste's sleeve as if the sheriff could anchor him against an unseen horror. Auguste stood, the journal trembling in his grip. This was no simple neglect or wandering child. Someone had hidden him here, someone desperate. And whatever had been done above, long before the boy's first memory, still cast its shadow over Belle Rive. A sudden creak from the stairwell snapped Auguste's attention upward. Someone, or something, was coming. Footsteps heavy, deliberate, and filled with rage. The child screamed, finally breaking the silence with a voice that was at once innocent and warning. Auguste's heart pounded. Belle Rive had been silent for years, but the dead and the guilty were waking. Next, Auguste would confront a figure from the past, one who might destroy everything he sought to protect. Before we go deeper, understand this. This story isn't for everyone. If you're still here, you're one of the few who can face what America buried. Subscribe now, and tell me in the comments, what state are you listening from? And would you dare hear this story from your own backyard? Chapter 2. Shadows in the Hall. Auguste's lantern flickered violently, casting long, jagged shadows against the peeling walls of Belle Rive. The child clung to his coat, small hands trembling, eyes darting toward the staircase. Another creak, slow, deliberate, punctuated by the groan of old timber, echoed through the basement. The sheriff's heart tightened. He had entered this house expecting ghosts of neglect, but now he sensed the weight of something far darker. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Auguste raised his lantern, the light slicing through the darkness to reveal a figure at the top of the stairs. A man, broad-shouldered, face obscured by shadow. His coat was tattered, boots caked in mud. He did not speak. He only stared, the air between them thick with menace. Auguste could feel the heat of hatred radiating from him. "Who are you?" Auguste demanded, voice firm, despite the unease curling in his stomach. The figure remained silent, a predator observing prey. Then, without warning, he descended the stairs, each step precise, deliberate. The child shrieked and hid behind Auguste's legs, whispering words the sheriff could not understand. "Easy now," Auguste said, keeping his hands raised but ready. The man stopped mere feet away, and finally spoke. A low, rasping voice, thick with anger and old grief. "You shouldn't have come here." Each word carried the weight of a history Auguste could not yet grasp. "What is this child to you?" Auguste asked, his eyes flicking to the boy. The child's grip tightened on his sleeve, and Auguste realized with a chilling certainty that the boy's terror was not of him, but of the man before them. The stranger's eyes, dark and haunted, bore into Auguste's own. "He remembers," the man said, almost a whisper. "He remembers what we tried to bury. You cannot protect him from what comes." Auguste swallowed hard, heart hammering. Belle-Reve had secrets, more than whispered rumors, more than the decay of abandoned rooms. But this man, this living shadow, carried those secrets like a blade, ready to strike. Auguste felt a surge of determination. He would not allow the past to claim this child, not while he still drew breath. Suddenly, a loud crack sounded from the far wall, the sound of wood splitting under immense force. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling, and the basement seemed to convulse around them. The child screamed, throwing himself against Auguste, and the shadowed figure recoiled as though struck by the very air itself. In the chaos, the boy's small hand slipped from Auguste's grasp. He ran toward a dark corner, where the remnants of a hidden staircase led further down, deeper beneath the plantation. Auguste lunged, catching the edge of the child's shirt, but another tremor shook the floor. The stranger's voice rose, a growl of rage. "If he escapes, all will be lost." Auguste tightened his grip and forced the boy back toward the lantern's circle. But he knew the truth, a cold realization settling in his chest. Someone or something had lived down here for years, hidden, feeding on fear, carrying vengeance. Belle-Reve had claimed many lives in its past. This child might be the last, or the first in a reckoning long overdue. As the shadows danced and the ceiling threatened to collapse, Auguste faced the truth. The danger was not just the stranger above. It was what had been buried long ago, and what was awakening now, beneath the plantation's cursed floor. Next, Auguste would discover a hidden journal that hinted at betrayal, murder, and a secret that could ignite a war within Belle-Reve itself. Chapter 3. The Hidden Journal. The basement stank of mold and decay, but beneath the odor of rot lay another scent, a faint metallic tang that made Auguste's stomach twist. The child clung to his coat, his small body trembling as he pointed toward the far wall, where the remnants of a collapsed beam had revealed a narrow cavity. Auguste knelt, lantern in hand, and peered inside. There it was, a small, leather-bound journal, blackened at the edges, but intact. He pulled it free carefully, noting the intricate script on the first page. The handwriting was delicate yet precise, belonging not to a child, but to someone accustomed to control, to order, to secrets. The words were chilling in their clarity. Accounts of the plantation's management, lists of debts, names of workers, and cryptic annotations that hinted at violence. The pages spoke of a house that devoured loyalty, where whispers of betrayal were punished in ways that no law could touch. Auguste flipped the pages, heart racing. One entry caught his eye, a description of a child, stolen from their parents, hidden away beneath the floors of Belle-Reve. The words were chillingly precise, as though the writer had watched every detail unfold. "The boy must never know," it read, "or all will unravel. Let the house swallow him, and let the past remain silent." The child whimpered, glancing nervously at the shadowed corners of the basement. Auguste understood now. This was the very boy the journal described, a prisoner of circumstance, hidden to protect a secret too dangerous to expose. The weight of anger rose in Augustus' chest. Who could commit such cruelty, and why? A sudden creak above made him snap his head upward. The figure from before loomed at the top of the stairs, motionless but exuding a presence that radiated both fear and authority. Auguste held the journal close, a barrier against the man's gaze. "His child belongs to no one now," he said, voice firm. "We will find the truth, and no one will hide it again." The man's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Truth is a luxury," he said slowly. "One that costs far more than you realize." His eyes flicked to the journal, and Auguste knew instinctively that the contents could ignite a chain of events far deadlier than either could imagine. Thunder rumbled outside, shaking the plantation walls, and the child shrank further against Auguste's leg. Lightning illuminated the basement, casting sharp shadows across the journal's pages. Names and dates leapt from the paper as though the house itself were demanding justice. The words revealed betrayals, murders, and debts of vengeance that had festered for years. Each entry hinted at an unseen hand guiding events, manipulating lives, and punishing those who dared defy it. Auguste's mind raced. Belle-Rive was no ordinary plantation. It was a house built on secrets, a labyrinth of hidden motives and unresolved rage. And the child, innocent and fragile, was the living key to unlocking those mysteries. But the journal also warned of a figure watching, one who would stop at nothing to reclaim control over the boy and preserve the darkness buried for generations. A floorboard groaned beneath the stranger's weight. Auguste looked up, heart hammering, and realized the man was advancing. Every instinct screamed at him: protect the child, uncover the truth, survive. The journal trembled in his hands, its brittle pages holding promises of revelation and peril. Next, Auguste would confront a secret chamber, a place where Belle-Rive's darkest sins had been performed, and discover evidence that could destroy a family's name forever. Chapter 4. Beneath the floorboards, Auguste's lantern trembled as he followed the child toward the far corner of the basement. The boy's small fingers traced along splintered wood, stopping at a section of floorboards that seemed slightly raised, almost imperceptible beneath the filth and rot. Auguste knelt and pressed down, testing the fragile planks. They shifted with a hollow groan. Below, a faint draught whispered of hidden space, of air trapped for years in silence. The stranger at the stairs let out a low hiss, but did not move forward. Auguste sensed a twisted restraint, a hesitation born of recognition or fear. The child, emboldened, lifted a corner of the plank, revealing a narrow stairway carved into the earth itself, descending into darkness so profound it seemed to swallow the lantern's glow. The smell intensified, damp soil, rot, and something sharper, metallic, that made Auguste's stomach churn. "Stay close," he whispered, taking the child's hand. Each step downward was slow, careful, as if the house itself were resisting their intrusion. The stranger's boots followed, soundless now, yet the oppressive heat of his presence pressed upon them. Auguste's pulse raced. He had uncovered journals, hints of betrayal and signs of hidden cruelty. But what awaited below could surpass anything the mind dared imagine. The staircase ended in a narrow chamber, no more than 12 feet wide. The walls were lined with rough-hewn stone, damp and pockmarked with mildew. At the center, a wooden platform, darkened and scarred, bore signs of former use, marks that suggested struggle, long ago silenced but not erased. Auguste's eyes widened as he saw the remnants, fragments of broken chains, rusted hooks, and the faint outlines of symbols carved into the floorboards, symbols of warning, of ritual, of vengeance. The child stepped forward, voice trembling. They kept me here," he whispered. His words, so small, echoed off the stone, filling the chamber with a sorrow older than the boy himself. Auguste felt rage surge, hot and sharp, piercing the fear that clung to him. How many lives had Belle-Rive consumed beneath its polished floors, hidden behind wealth and etiquette? How many screams had been swallowed by these walls? by the house that thrived on secrecy. The stranger's voice cut through the chamber, sharp and deadly. "You should not be here," he said, advancing. His hands trembled, though his expression was masked by fury. "This boy belongs to no one but the truth of what happened." Auguste tightened his grip on the child, stepping between him and the man. Suddenly, a loose stone shifted under Auguste's boot, revealing a hidden cavity beneath the platform. Inside lay more fragments, charred papers, a silver locket, and a small bundle tied with frayed ribbon. The child reached for it hesitantly, and when he opened the bundle, Auguste felt a chill race down his spine. Inside was a miniature portrait of a woman, pale, defiant, and hauntingly familiar. Her eyes, painted with meticulous care, seemed to burn with a silent warning. A note tucked behind it read, "She knows. She will not forgive." The stranger's face twisted with fury. "Where did you find that?" he demanded. Auguste realized in that instant that this chamber, these relics, were the key to a decades-old vendetta, and the awakening of a hatred that had festered in the shadows of Bellerive. Next, Auguste would uncover the true identity of the boy, the reason he had been hidden, and the secret that could ignite a feud deadly enough to destroy the plantation itself. Chapter 5. The Woman in the Portrait. Auguste held the miniature portrait delicately, as though the fragile painting itself might shatter beneath his fingers. The woman's eyes were impossibly vivid, pale blue, defiant, and strangely accusatory, as if she had witnessed every crime committed within Bellerive and condemned it silently. The child peered over his shoulder, whispering a name that made Auguste pause. "Mademoiselle Elise." The stranger's face darkened. "You shouldn't speak her name," he hissed, stepping closer, every muscle taut with suppressed fury. Auguste's grip on the child tightened instinctively. Whoever this man was, he was intimately connected to the secrets of Bellerive, and now, with the portrait uncovered, he feared exposure. Auguste studied the journal again, leafing through brittle pages. Mentions of a woman who had vanished years ago were scattered among entries detailing deaths, punishments, and whispered warnings. One passage, dated 1847, was particularly chilling. "Elise knows too much. If she returns, everything will unravel. She must never set foot on these grounds again." The handwriting trembled here, betraying panic, fear that someone, long thought gone, might return to reclaim what was stolen. The child tugged at Auguste's sleeve. She is my mother," he whispered, voice barely audible. "I remember her sometimes, in dreams, before I was hidden." Auguste's heart tightened. This boy had been living beneath the plantation for years, isolated, terrorized, and yet he retained fragments of memory, shards of a family stolen from him. The rage and sorrow pressing against Auguste's chest became unbearable. The stranger's eyes darted toward the portrait. "If she comes back," he snarled, "you will see why Bellerive never forgives, never forgets." His voice cracked with hatred, the kind born of years nursing a wound too deep for time to heal. Alcin Auguste realized then that this man was both jailer and witness, bound by loyalty to secrets older than the plantation itself. A sudden rumble shook the chamber, dust falling from the low ceiling. The house seemed alive, protesting the disturbance of its darkest corners. Auguste sensed it. Bellerive had always been more than wood and stone. It was a vessel for memory, for vengeance, for sins that festered like rot beneath the surface. And now, with the boy and the portrait unearthed, those sins were awakening. The child's gaze lingered on the locket within the bundle. Inside was a lock of hair, golden and soft, tied with a faded ribbon, the last tangible connection to a mother lost long ago. Auguste swallowed hard, knowing that the revelations contained in the portrait and locket could ignite something deadly, revenge, betrayal, a reckoning decades in the making. The stranger's hands clenched into fists. "You've uncovered too much," he spat. "Do you know what happens to those who pry into the past?" Auguste's eyes met the man's, and he saw the truth. Bellerive had claimed more than the child. It had claimed obedience, silence, and blood. And now the house demanded justice, or vengeance. A sudden creak sounded from above, followed by a muffled scream, a signal that someone was coming, someone alive, someone who knew more than either of them. Auguste realized in that moment that Belle Reeve's darkest secret was not buried beneath the floors. It was returning. Next, Auguste would confront the first living member of the family responsible for hiding the child, and the truth of Elise's disappearance would begin to unravel in a storm of hatred and vengeance. Chapter 6. The First Witness. The scream echoed again, sharper this time, cutting through the basement like a whip. Auguste froze, holding the child close, lantern trembling in his hand. The shadows above shifted, as though the house itself breathed with anticipation. Belle Reeve had long hidden its truths beneath floorboards and walls, but now, with every secret unearthed, the walls seemed eager to witness judgment. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs, partially illuminated by the lantern's flicker. A woman, her dress faded and torn, yet moving with a quiet authority that silenced the stranger. Her eyes, grey and unyielding, scanned the room with a mixture of fear and calculation. Auguste's breath caught. This had to be Elise, the woman in the miniature portrait, the child's mother. The boy let out a small cry and ran into her arms. The reunion was hesitant, fraught with the fragility of lost years. Elise held him tightly, whispering words he had never heard aloud, and Auguste realized that this woman had survived the plantation's cruelty somewhere beyond Belle Reeve. Somehow she had endured, and now she had returned to confront the past. The stranger's eyes narrowed, fixed on Elise. A low growl of fury escaped him. "You weren't supposed to come back," he spat, voice trembling with rage and fear. "You were supposed to vanish. You were supposed to leave everything hidden." Auguste stepped forward, lantern raised, his presence a shield for mother and child alike. Elise's voice was steady, though her eyes burned with a storm of emotion. "I did not leave," she said, each word deliberate. "I was taken, hidden away, and now I have returned to claim what was stolen. The truth, my son, and justice for the years we were denied." Her gaze swept the stranger, unflinching, commanding, yet haunted by memories of suffering. The stranger's jaw tightened. He advanced a step, the air between them crackling with hatred. "Justice? You think you can survive Belle Reeve's wrath? The house has rules, punishments carved in blood. You may have returned, but everything you touch here will burn." He gestured toward the hidden chamber, toward the journal, toward the relics unearthed beneath the floor. "All of this, your son. It is not yours to claim." Auguste clenched his teeth. Belle Reeve had birthed hatred that spanned decades, fueled by secrets, betrayal, and fear. But Elise's presence, alive, determined, shifted the balance. The child clung to her skirts, trembling, yet resolute in the recognition of a mother he had imagined in dreams. Lightning split the sky outside, illuminating the chamber, and for a fleeting moment the walls seemed to lean in, attentive, as if awaiting a verdict. Auguste realized the truth. The stranger was not the only danger. Belle Reeve itself was a force, alive with grudges, eager to consume those who dared uncover its sins. Elise released the boy slowly, eyes locked on the stranger. "We will not flee," she said, voice cutting through the tension. "We will face this, all of it, and you will answer for what you did." Her words were like a bell tolling in the darkness, final, unyielding, impossible to ignore. The stranger recoiled, eyes wild, fury twisting into panic. He knew her return threatened everything he had maintained in shadow. And then a floorboard beneath him cracked, sending a cascade of dust into the chamber, and Auguste realized the building itself had chosen a side. Next, Auguste and Elise would descend further into the labyrinth beneath Belle Reeve, discovering the full scope of the plantation's atrocities, and the first clues to a conspiracy that had shaped lives for decades. Did you know, in the antebellum period, before the Civil War, Louisiana's plantation economy was heavily dependent on enslaved labor, so much so that by 1860 there were more than 331,000 enslaved people in the state, and in many parishes slaves made up nearly half of the total population. Plantations there produced sugar and cotton on a massive scale, and enslaved workers, including children and whole families, were forced to work incredibly long days under brutal conditions. Enslaved children were legally considered the property of their owners and had no personal rights. If their mother was enslaved, the child was automatically enslaved as well. Photographs taken during the Civil War era show enslaved children brought to New Orleans, where they were freed by Union forces, and such images were even published to raise funds for education for freed people. This harsh reality underpins many real stories from that era and illustrates how deeply families were affected, torn apart by forced labor and the systemic cruelty that defined plantation life in Louisiana. Chapter 7. The Labyrinth Below. Auguste held the lantern high, its feeble light slicing through the thick darkness of the hidden stairway beneath Belle Rive. The air grew colder the further they descended, heavy with the scent of earth, decay, and something fouler, like old blood. The child clutched Elise's hand tightly, no longer afraid of her presence, but shivering from the oppressive atmosphere that pressed against their skin. "This house," Elise whispered, her voice trembling yet firm, "was built to hide more than people. It hides truths that can kill." Auguste nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Belle Rive had been a monument to wealth, but beneath its opulent floors lay a web of secrets, so twisted that every step could reveal another horror. The stairwell ended in a long corridor carved from solid earth, narrow, claustrophobic, and lined with niches that once held tools, or perhaps instruments of punishment. Auguste noticed etchings on the walls, symbols matching those found in the chamber above, faint and almost invisible in the flickering lantern light. They spoke of warnings, curses, and the meticulous documentation of cruelty. The plantation's architects had not merely built a house, they had constructed a labyrinth of fear. The child's small voice broke the silence. "I remember. A door," he whispered. "A door with chains." Elise's eyes widened. "Where?" she asked urgently. The boy pointed to a darkened section of the wall. Auguste approached, pressing his hands against the stone. There was a faint draft, a hollow echo beneath the earth. With careful effort, he discovered a hidden latch. It gave way with a low, reluctant groan, revealing a chamber deeper still. Inside, the walls were slick with moisture, the floor uneven. Rusted chains hung from hooks embedded in the stone, some still bearing remnants of rope. Auguste's stomach twisted. These were no ordinary prison cells. This was a holding place for terror, where people had been hidden, punished, and forgotten. The smell of decay was nearly suffocating, and yet, in a corner, something caught Auguste's eye. A pile of old clothing, meticulously folded, almost as if someone had cared enough to maintain order even in hell. Elise stepped forward, trembling, recognizing familiar patterns. These belong to the house servants," she said softly, "and to my mother." Her voice cracked as she traced a hand along the wet stones. "She hid people here, yes, but she also tried to save them. My family. We were caught between cruelty and mercy." The stranger appeared behind them, emerging from the stairwell above, eyes dark with fury and desperation. "You cannot know this," he spat. "You were meant to remain ignorant. The past belongs to Belle Rive." His voice rose, echoing down the corridors, carrying a venomous weight. Auguste stepped in front of Elise and the child, lantern trembling. He realized then that the labyrinth beneath the plantation was not merely a place of imprisonment. It was a map of obsession, a record of vengeance, and a warning that every secret had a price. And now, with Elise returned, with the child alive, Belle Rive's shadow would no longer be silent. The stranger advanced suddenly, a knife glinting in the lantern light. Auguste's heart leapt into his throat. The corridor was narrow. Escape would be impossible. Dust fell from the low ceiling as the air seemed to thicken. The child screamed, clutching Elise, and Auguste braced himself for confrontation. Next, a violent struggle would erupt in the labyrinth, exposing the first of Belle Rive's lethal truths, and the first death that would ignite a chain of vengeance stretching back decades. Chapter 8. Blood on the Stone. The stranger lunged, knife flashing in the dim lantern light, and Auguste reacted instinctively, shoving Elise and the child aside. The blade nicked the wall, sparking against stone, sending a shower of dust and grit into the corridor. The air was thick, suffocating, smelling of rust and old earth. Each heartbeat echoed like a drum in Auguste's skull as he faced the man, realizing that Belle Reeve's vengeance was no longer hidden. It had a pulse, and it moved with deadly intent. "Step aside!" Auguste barked, voice sharp as the stranger advanced, eyes burning with a hatred that had festered for decades. His movements were precise, honed by years of guarding secrets, punishing those who threatened to expose the plantation's sins. Auguste had no choice but to fight, to protect the child and the woman who had endured so much. The child whimpered, clinging to Elise, whose eyes blazed with fear and determination. "He mustn't hurt him," she whispered. Her hands were small, but her presence was magnetic, grounding Auguste as he squared off against the figure who had lurked in shadows for so long. They grappled, bodies pressed against the stone walls. Sparks of rage and desperation flew with every push and shove. Auguste could feel the stranger's strength, brutal and honed by years of secrecy, but he refused to relent. The lantern swung wildly, casting jagged shadows that danced across the walls, flickering over chains, etchings, and signs of the countless lives Belle Reeve had consumed. A sharp cry cut through the chaos as the child screamed, pointing at the floor. Auguste glanced down and saw a dark stain on the stone. Fresh blood, not old, not dried, but vivid, seeping from a crack in the floor. His stomach churned. The stranger's eyes flicked downward, and a flicker of panic crossed his face. He hesitated, ever so briefly, and Auguste seized the moment, twisting, forcing the knife from his hands. The man stumbled backward, clutching his arm, eyes wild. You don't understand," he shouted, voice raw with fury and fear. "This house, it demands—" His words faltered, broken by the realization that his control was slipping. Belle Reeve, with its labyrinth and hidden chambers, its histories of cruelty, was no longer his ally. Auguste breathed heavily, his grip on the lantern firm. The child stared at the blood on the stone, recognition dawning in his wide eyes. It's hers," he whispered. Elise's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide, and Auguste followed her gaze. The blood was not random. It marked the first of Belle Reeve's unspoken murders, the remains of someone hidden, forgotten, a warning etched in violence, centuries too late. The stranger's defiance wavered. His hatred had been nurtured for decades, yet now he faced not just exposure, but the tangible proof of Belle Reeve's cruelty, the blood, the chains, the symbols, and the child who had survived against all odds. Auguste realized with a cold certainty that this confrontation was only the beginning. Belle Reeve's labyrinth, its shadows and its secrets were alive, and they demanded answers. Every step forward would reveal more horrors, more betrayals, more truths that could ignite a storm of vengeance long suppressed. Next, Auguste and Elise would uncover the identity of the first victim hidden beneath Belle Reeve, and the shocking revelation that would bind the past and present in a tapestry of murder, betrayal, and revenge. Chapter 9. The First Victim. Auguste knelt beside the dark stain on the stone floor, lantern held steady as the flickering light revealed more than he had anticipated. Beneath the surface, partially hidden in a shallow crack, were fragments of cloth and brittle bones, yellowed and cracked with age. The child recoiled, hiding behind Elise, his small fingers clutching her skirts. Is she dead?" he whispered, voice trembling. Auguste swallowed hard, the weight of Belle Reeve pressing down on him like a suffocating fog. Elise stepped forward, face pale but determined. She traced the fragments with careful fingers, recognizing the delicate fabric as belonging to the servants' quarters. Her breath caught in her throat. This is not just history," she murmured. "This is my mother's handmaid, Claire. She was buried alive for trying to protect me." Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice was steel beneath her sorrow. Auguste's heart throbbed with anger. Belle Reeve had been a house of terror, yes, but this was deliberate cruelty, punishment for compassion. The stranger watched silently from the stairwell, his expression twisting between rage and panic. Auguste realized that he had underestimated the depth of the plantation's horror. This man was not just a keeper of secrets, he was a participant, a willing executor of a decades-old vendetta. Every act of cruelty, every hidden chamber, had been orchestrated to protect something, or someone. Auguste lifted the fragments carefully. The bones were fragile, but they told a story: fear, confinement, desperation. He glanced at the journal, leafing to the entries that chronicled servants and slaves, their punishments, and hidden deaths. One line, written in spidery script, made his blood run cold. Those who defy the rules of Bellerive shall vanish, leaving no trace, so that the house's honor remains intact. The boy shivered beside Elise, understanding instinctively that these words had governed his own years underground. Lightning flashed, illuminating the stranger's face. His eyes were wide with something close to terror. You cannot reveal her death," he spat. "It will undo everything. The plantation, my family. It will crumble." Auguste's jaw tightened. The walls of Bellerive had already begun to crumble, not from age, but from the exposure of secrets long buried. And now, with the bones uncovered, the first layer of its true history was emerging. Elise bent closer to the fragments, whispering to the child, "Claire saved my life. She loved us enough to risk hers. That is why you survived." Her words were a balm, but beneath them lay a fury, a burning desire for justice. Auguste saw it. The hatred that had festered beneath Bellerive for decades was alive in them now, not blind, but purposeful. The stranger's lips curled into a snarl. "You do not know what you've unleashed," he hissed. "This house. It takes revenge. Those who awaken it do not survive." Auguste met his gaze steadily, lantern light glinting off sweat and stone. The first victim had spoken. Bellerive's labyrinth had claimed its first life, and now its shadows would demand more. Next, Auguste and Elise would delve deeper into the house's archives, uncovering a list of names, betrayals, and murders, each revealing the web of greed and vengeance that had bound Bellerive for decades. Chapter 10. The Ledger of Secrets. Auguste carefully lifted the fragments of cloth and bones, setting them aside with reverence. The basement felt heavier now, as if Bellerive itself were aware of what had been uncovered. Elise pressed the child close, whispering soothing words, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the walls for any other hidden horrors. The air was thick with anticipation, the oppressive scent of damp earth and decay mingling with the metallic tang of old blood. "The journal isn't enough," Auguste muttered, flipping through brittle pages for clues. His hand fell upon a loose floorboard near the far wall. Beneath it lay a leather-bound ledger, its cover worn and cracked, the pages dense with ink. Unlike the journal, which had chronicled events selectively, this ledger promised names, dates, and the cold arithmetic of cruelty. It was Bellerive's accounting of sins, a ledger not of money, but of lives. Elise leaned over his shoulder, eyes widening as she read. The first entries recorded debts, not financial, but moral and social. The infractions of servants, overseers, and family alike, followed by corrections that often ended in disappearance. One name leapt off the page: Claire, the handmaid whose bones lay half buried in the floor. Her death had been anticipated, recorded with precise calculation, as if to ensure the plantation's control extended beyond the grave. The child clutched the locket in his hand, whispering the fragments of memories that had haunted him underground. They made me stay," he said softly. Elise's hand tightened around his. "They thought they could bury us both, but they underestimated how far the truth would reach." Auguste felt a surge of determination. Bellerive had thrived on secrecy, but the ledger would not remain hidden. The stranger shifted at the stairwell, the shadows bending around him like smoke. His hands were clenched, knuckles white, yet he did not approach. His rage simmered just beneath the surface, restrained by fear of the exposure that now loomed. Auguste understood then that the ledger threatened more than the man's pride. It threatened the foundation upon which Bellerive had been built. Elise turned a page, her eyes scanning the meticulous record of betrayals, punishments, and disappearances. The ledger revealed something that had eluded them until now. A pattern. Deaths and disappearances clustered around the child's family line, an intentional purge to consolidate power and preserve the plantation's wealth. The realization was crushing. Every life lost, every secret buried, had been orchestrated to protect the same dark legacy. Auguste closed the ledger with a snap, the sound echoing through the stone chamber. "We have proof," he said firmly. "Names, dates, crimes. We can't ignore this. Belle-Rive's history doesn't belong to a shadow anymore." Elise nodded, eyes burning with resolve, the fire of vengeance igniting alongside grief. The child's small hand pressed against her heart, and Auguste realized that the fight had already begun, not for survival alone, but for justice. Lightning flashed through the basement, illuminating the stranger's twisted expression. He muttered something under his breath, indecipherable, yet filled with malice. Auguste knew that the ledger would mark the beginning of a reckoning that Belle-Rive had never anticipated. Every shadow, every secret, and every death recorded in its pages would be called to account. Next, Auguste and Elise would follow the ledger's clues to the overseer who had enforced the plantation's cruelty, confronting the first living participant in Belle-Rive's web of vengeance and discovering a secret that would shake the foundation of the entire estate. Chapter 11. The Overseer's Confession. Auguste and Elise ascended the hidden stairway cautiously, the child clutching her skirts. The plantation above seemed alive with silence, the air heavy with anticipation. The ledger had pointed them toward a man who had survived Belle-Rive's reign of terror. Lucien Dufresne, the overseer who had executed the house's cruelties with ruthless precision. If anyone could explain the disappearances, the hidden chambers, and the years the child had spent underground, it would be him. Lucien's cabin was small, constructed of weathered cypress boards that creaked with every step. Smoke from the hearth curled upward, carrying the scent of cornbread and strong coffee. He sat at a rough wooden table, eyes sunken, fingers twisted over the edge, as though years of guilt had contorted his body. He looked up as Auguste entered, a flicker of recognition passing through his weary eyes. "Sheriff," Lucien said cautiously, voice hoarse from disuse. I did what I was told. Belle-Rive. It demanded obedience." Auguste stepped forward, lantern in hand, the child and Elise close behind. "Obedience to what?" he demanded. "To cruelty? To murder? To bury a boy alive beneath your master's floorboards?" Lucien flinched. His hands shook as he rose, rubbing his face. I kept the child safe. In my way, I preserved him. But the orders were absolute. They would have killed anyone who interfered." Elise stepped closer, voice sharp. "Safe? By hiding him for years, starving him, leaving him in darkness? That is not protection, Lucien. That is imprisonment. That is complicity." The overseer's eyes filled with tears, and he slumped against the table. I tried to shield him from Madame's wrath. She, Elise's mother, tried to protect those she loved, but she vanished. The plantation's walls swallowed her, and when she disappeared, I had no choice. I obeyed to survive. I feared for the boy's life every day. Auguste listened, heart pounding, realizing the layers of fear, guilt, and hatred that had sustained Belle-Rive's horrors. Elise's voice softened slightly, though it still carried steel. "And yet you watched, Lucien. You watched while they buried Claire alive, while they sought to erase my family. You were complicit in that death. We can forgive survival, perhaps, but not murder. Not silence in the face of injustice." The child clutched the locket to his chest, tears brimming, and for the first time he spoke clearly. "I remember her. Claire. She tried to save me. She died for me." Lucien's hands shook as he nodded, voice barely audible. "Yes, she did. And I failed her. I cannot undo it. But the ledger proves everything. Every crime, every name, every hidden death. It is all there." Auguste held the ledger tighter, feeling the weight of decades of cruelty pressed into brittle pages. Suddenly, a sound outside the cabin, the snap of a branch, the low creak of the plantation gates. made them all freeze. Belle-Reve was awakening once more, as if the very house demanded attention. Lucien looked up, panic flashing. "They know," he whispered. "The family. They will not forgive discovery. You must leave now, before it's too late." Next, Auguste and Élise would confront the first living member of the family who had orchestrated the child's concealment, uncovering the face of hatred that had ruled Belle-Reve and realizing that the plantation's vengeance was far from finished. Chapter 12. The Family Returns. The wind whipped through the cypress trees surrounding Belle-Reve, carrying the scent of rain and decay. Auguste, Élise, the child, and Lucien moved cautiously toward the main house, every step heavy with anticipation. The ledger had revealed too much. Every name, every crime recorded beneath the floors was now a beacon to those who sought to protect, or punish, the secrets of the plantation. As they approached the grand front veranda, lantern light flickered against the peeling paint and broken shutters. A carriage rattled down the overgrown path, wheels crunching against the gravel. Élise froze, recognizing the emblem embossed on the side, the family seal of her father, long thought dead or absent. Her lips trembled. "They've returned," she whispered. "They know." Auguste stepped forward, hand on the child's shoulder. "We face them together," he said firmly. Lucien's eyes darted nervously toward the approaching carriage, his body tense as if decades of suppressed fear had returned in an instant. Belle-Rive's true power was not in its architecture or its hidden chambers. It was in the family who had ruled it with iron cruelty. And now they were coming back to reclaim control. The carriage stopped abruptly in front of the veranda. A man and a woman stepped down, their posture perfect, faces pale and controlled, yet their eyes were sharp and calculating. Elise's breath caught. The man was her uncle, Victor, a figure she had feared in memory and legend alike. The woman beside him was his wife, delicate yet cruel in bearing. Both exuded the same chilling authority that had haunted the plantation for decades. Victor's eyes fell upon the group, and his lips curled into a slow, deliberate smile. "Well," he said, voice smooth but laced with menace, "it seems Belle-Reve has awakened from its long slumber." His gaze swept the child, then Eli. "And it seems we have visitors who believe they can unearth what should remain buried." Élise stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "You return to destroy the truth," she said, "to maintain your illusions of control. But Belle-Rive's darkness is no longer yours alone. We know, the ledger knows, and your legacy of cruelty ends now." Victor's expression hardened, eyes narrowing. "Do you truly believe a child and a frightened woman can undo decades of order? Belle-Rive does not forgive, Élise. It consumes those who defy it. That child, your son, he is the spark of what should never be revealed." His hand brushed the carriage whip at his side, a subtle but unmistakable threat. Auguste's jaw tightened. This is no longer just a house. It is evidence. The ledger, the hidden chambers, the bones, all of it will speak. Your threats cannot erase history. He glanced at Lucien, who nodded subtly, an unspoken confirmation that the overseer would finally testify to years of cruelty. Victor's lips pressed into a thin line, fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. "Very well," he said quietly. "If you insist on opening the past, you will understand why Belle-Rive protects its own. And you," he added, eyes locking on the child, "will discover the consequences of disturbing what should remain hidden." A storm broke above, rain lashing against the veranda, and lightning illuminated Belle-Rive in a harsh, unforgiving glare. The child clung to Élise, their eyes wide. Auguste felt a cold certainty. The confrontation with the family would unearth not only secrets, but blood, vengeance, and a hatred that had been brewing for generations. Next, Auguste would navigate a perilous confrontation with Victor and his wife, where the first shocking act of revenge would ignite a chain of events that would consume Belle-Rive entirely. Chapter 13. The Confrontation. The rain pounded against Belle-Rive with relentless fury, drumming against the roof like the march of unseen footsteps. Auguste stood on the veranda, lantern held high, feeling the chill of both storm and anticipation. Victor's gaze was sharp, unyielding, and it carried the weight of decades spent ruling the plantation with fear. Beside him, his wife's eyes glittered with cold amusement, a silent promise that Belle Reeve's vengeance was ready to strike. Elise held the child close, their small hands intertwined, a fragile shield against the storm of hatred descending upon them. "We know everything," Elise said, voice trembling yet commanding. "The ledger, the bones, the hidden chambers, all of it. You cannot hide behind this house anymore." Victor's lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile, but his eyes were hard, calculating. "Do you understand what you've done?" he asked, voice low, deadly. "You have awakened decades of resentment. Belle Reeve does not forgive, and those who pry into its past rarely leave unscathed. That child," he added, gesturing toward the boy, "is at the center of a legacy you cannot comprehend." Auguste stepped forward, shielding the child with his body. "This boy is not a symbol for your cruelty. He is a living witness, and the truth will not be buried again." His voice carried over the storm, defiant and unwavering, but he could feel the tension coiling in the air, a palpable hatred ready to strike. Victor's wife stepped closer, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Do you truly believe you can survive the reckoning you've begun?" She gestured toward the plantation, every word dripping with venom. "Belle Reeve has eyes everywhere. Every floorboard, every hidden stair, every secret chamber is a testament to obedience, control, and punishment. You," her gaze landed on the child, "are trespassing in a history that has never meant to be uncovered." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the veranda in a harsh, blinding glare. The child cried out, pointing to a corner of the veranda where a trapdoor had been concealed beneath the wet planks. Auguste's heart seized. The house had more secrets, and Victor's calm demeanor suggested he knew exactly what awaited below. Victor's eyes flicked to the trapdoor, a flicker of rage passing over his features. "You found it," he said, voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. "Beneath this house lies the proof of what should remain silent. The past will consume you if you dare to open it." Elise's hand tightened around the child's, her eyes blazing. "We are not afraid," she said. "We will uncover every secret, every injustice, every crime. Belle Reeve will answer for what it has done." The tension was electric, a storm of fury, fear, and anticipation. Victor's hands clenched at his sides, nails digging into palms. The first move would decide everything, whether Belle Reeve's legacy of terror would continue, or if the truth would finally break free from the shadows. Auguste exhaled slowly, lantern swinging as he prepared to open the trapdoor. The storm's roar seemed to echo the heartbeat of the house itself. He glanced at Elise and the child, seeing determination and fear interwoven, and knew that the moment of reckoning had arrived. Next, Auguste and Elise would descend into the hidden chamber beneath the veranda, confronting the darkest act Belle Reeve had concealed, and discovering a truth more horrifying than they could have imagined. Chapter 14. The Hidden Chamber. Auguste lifted the trapdoor slowly, the groan of rusted hinges echoing through the veranda as rain hammered the roof. The child pressed close to Elise, trembling yet determined, as the lantern cast a trembling cone of light down the narrow descent. Below, darkness seemed alive, swallowing sound and hope alike. Belle Reeve had waited for decades to reveal its most sinister secret, and now it demanded witness. The stairwell led to a small chamber carved from stone and earth, no larger than a closet, yet oppressive in its presence. The air was thick with decay and the metallic scent of old blood. Chains hung from hooks in the walls, some broken, others intact, and the floor was marked with scuffs and gouges, testimony to long-forgotten struggles. At the center, a wooden table, splintered and stained, bore the remnants of a life extinguished with cruelty. Elise gasped, recognizing the carvings etched into the table's edges, symbols she had seen in her mother's journals. Her fingers traced the marks, connecting the dots of Belle-Rive's deliberate, methodical terror. This is where they... Her voice broke. She pressed the child close, whispering, "They tried to erase us. But you survived." Auguste's eyes scanned the chamber, noting piles of documents, charred papers, and a small chest tucked in a corner. The chest was locked, but brittle, worn with age. He pried it open, revealing a collection of letters, journals, and a bundle wrapped in faded silk. The child's eyes widened when he saw a worn bonnet inside, embroidered delicately with his mother's initials. He reached out, and Elise let him hold it, understanding that these relics were fragments of a life stolen, hidden, and nearly erased. Suddenly, Victor's voice echoed down the stairs. "You dare touch what is mine?" he shouted, fury laced with desperation. The storm above. He seemed to pulse with his anger. Auguste turned, lantern shaking, but Elise stepped forward, voice unwavering. "It belongs to the truth now," she said, "and the truth will not be buried beneath your tyranny any longer." Victor's hands slammed against the trapdoor frame, the wood rattling under his strength. "You will regret this," he roared. "Belle-Rive protects its secrets, and it takes revenge upon those who defile them." The chamber seemed to shiver under the force of his wrath, the walls closing in as if the house itself were alive, feeding on fear. Auguste grabbed the child's hand and Elise's arm, holding them steady. "We will uncover everything," he said, determination hardening his voice. "Every hidden death, every betrayal, every act of cruelty. Belle-Rive's shadows cannot consume what we now carry into the light." Lightning illuminated the chamber, revealing the scattered remains of the plantation's hidden atrocities, mementos of vanished lives, records of torment, and the spectral echoes of screams long silenced. The weight of decades pressed down on them, but for the first time, Auguste, Elise, and the child were not afraid. They were armed with knowledge, with evidence, with the power to confront the past. Next, they would discover the first living accomplice of Belle-Rive's oldest crimes, and the revelation would expose a family betrayal so deep it could ignite a storm of vengeance, hatred, and blood that had been waiting decades to erupt. Chapter 15. The Accomplice Revealed. Auguste, Elise, and the child emerged from the hidden chamber, the storm still lashing Belle-Rive with relentless fury. Lantern in hand, Auguste scanned the veranda, anticipating Victor's next move, knowing that the plantation's legacy of cruelty was not confined to empty halls and decayed floorboards. Someone alive had helped conceal these atrocities, someone still loyal to the shadows that had ruled Belle-Rive for decades. Lucien stayed behind for a moment, visibly shaken. "There's another," he murmured, voice hoarse, eyes darting toward the east wing. "An accomplice. One who carried out the punishments, the disappearances, who ensured the ledger stayed hidden. And yet, unlike Victor, she still walks among the living. She watches, waits, ensures no secret is ever revealed." Auguste's pulse quickened. Belle-Rive had survived this long because fear had been executed with precision, and because this accomplice remained silent. They moved cautiously down the veranda, rain drenching their coats, the child clinging to Elise's skirts. Every step was calculated, every shadow could conceal a threat. Auguste's mind raced, connecting dots from the ledger, the journals, the hidden chambers. One name kept returning in cryptic notes and marginal annotations: Madeleine Rousseau. She had been Madame Elise's aunt by marriage, a woman noted in the ledger for loyalty, ruthlessness, and an uncanny ability to enforce the house's darker commands. They approached the east wing, its windows dark, the shutters rattling in the wind. A single light flickered on the second floor, and Elise froze, recognition striking her like a physical blow. "Madeleine," she whispered. She has returned to protect the secrets." A door creaked open, revealing a woman dressed in black, tall, gaunt, her eyes sharp and calculating. Her hair was streaked with grey, but her movements were precise, predatory. "So," she said, voice smooth and cold, "the child has returned, along with his mother and a meddlesome sheriff. I had thought the house would guard its own secrets longer, but Belle-Rive seems impatient tonight." The child gasped, hiding behind Elise. Auguste stepped forward, lantern raised. "Madeleine Rousseau," he said firmly. You knew about the hidden chambers, the ledger, the deaths, and yet you let them continue. Why? Why guard this house while so many suffered? Madeline's lips curled into a thin smile. Because someone had to maintain order, she replied, eyes flicking to Victor's distant silhouette in the storm. And because the house demanded obedience. You think your truths can undo decades of careful preservation. The ledger, the journals, the bones, these are reminders, not mistakes. Belle Reeve's power cannot be undone. Elise's voice trembled with barely restrained fury. You helped them bury my mother, imprison my son, and enforce a legacy of cruelty. Your obedience has cost lives. Madeline's eyes narrowed, glinting with rage and fear. And yet, here you are. You have awakened what should have remained silent. Belle Reeve will demand justice for your defiance. Lightning illuminated the veranda, revealing tension coiled like a predator ready to strike. Auguste realized in that moment the first living accomplice had been revealed, and she would not yield without a fight. Every shadow, every hidden passage, every secret of Belle Reeve now hung in delicate, dangerous balance. Next, Auguste, Elise, and the child would confront Madeleine directly, forcing her to reveal the darkest truths of Belle Reeve, and igniting the first act of vengeance that would shake the plantation to its foundations. Chapter 16. Secrets unraveled. The wind howled through Belle Reeve as Auguste, Elise, and the child stood on the veranda facing Madeleine. Rain poured, soaking their coats and plastering hair to their foreheads, but the storm was a whisper compared to the tension that crackled between them. Every shadow seemed alive, every corner of the plantation watching, waiting. Belle Reeve had survived generations because its secrets were enforced by fear. And now, fear had a face. Madeleine's eyes were sharp, cold as the stone beneath their feet. You believe you have uncovered everything, she said, voice laced with venom and command. But the ledger, the journals, the bones, they are fragments. There are truths still buried that even your courage cannot fathom. Auguste's jaw tightened. He had faced hidden chambers, bones, and decades of cruelty, but he sensed the weight of what was yet unknown. Elise stepped forward, voice quivering with anger and grief. You watched them die. You watched Claire, my mother's handmaid, buried alive. You allowed them to conceal the boy for years. Tell us now. Why? Why betray humanity for obedience? Madeleine's thin lips twisted into a sneer. Obedience is survival, she spat. Do you think the house tolerates defiance? Every life it claimed, every secret it preserved, was a lesson in control. And you would undo centuries of power with a few discoveries. Auguste's eyes narrowed. Control? You call it control? It is cruelty, murder, hatred carved into every plank of this house. The storm outside echoed his words, thunder booming as if the heavens themselves approved. The child clutched Elise's hand, trembling, yet resolute in the knowledge that the truth was finally being spoken aloud. Madeleine's voice dropped, softer but lethal. Your mother, Elise's mother. She tried to defy the house. She tried to protect the child. And for that, he vanished. You think she died by accident? No. Belle Reeve took her. The ledger records only fragments of her courage. You have yet to see the full account. Elise's eyes widened in horror. Her mother's fate, long suspected but never confirmed, loomed like a shadow over her soul. Auguste stepped closer, lantern raised. Then show us, he said firmly. Show us everything. The child survived, the bones have been found, and the ledger has spoken. The house has had its secrets long enough. Madeleine's lips pressed into a thin line. She hesitated, then slowly nodded. Very well. But once you see, you cannot unsee. Belle Reeve does not forgive. It devours those who dare illuminate what it hides. She turned, leading them through a narrow passage hidden behind the east wing wall. The lantern flickered over stone, chains and remnants of past atrocities. Each step seemed heavier than the last, weighted by centuries of cruelty, betrayal, and vengeance. Auguste felt the oppressive presence of Belle Reeve itself, as if the house were alive, guiding them toward the truths it had long concealed. At the end of the passage, a sealed chamber loomed, the air thick with decay and anticipation. Madeleine's hand trembled as she pushed open the door, revealing relics of Belle Reeve's most unspeakable acts. Documents, chains, and a carefully preserved journal lay before them, testimonies of cruelty, manipulation, and betrayal spanning decades. Next, Auguste and Elise would uncover the full extent of Belle Reeve's dark legacy and discover the shocking truth about the mother's disappearance, a revelation that would ignite rage, hatred, and the first act of vengeance against the family who had ruled with terror. Chapter 17. The Mother's Fate. The chamber was small, suffocating, yet it radiated a dark authority that seemed to press against their bones. Auguste held the lantern high, illuminating stacks of brittle journals, papers yellowed with age, and rusted implements whose purpose was all too clear. The air reeked of mold, decay, and something far fouler, an odor of despair that had lingered for decades, carried by the very stones of Belle Reeve. Madeleine's hands trembled as she opened a journal bound in blackened leather, her eyes flicking nervously to Auguste and Elise. "This," she whispered, voice barely audible, "is the account of what your mother endured. It was deemed necessary for the house's survival." Her words dripped with cold justification, yet fear shimmered beneath the surface. Belle Reeve had demanded obedience, and she had obeyed. Elise's breath caught. "Show me," she said, voice raw, trembling with anger and grief. The child clutched her skirts tightly, his eyes wide and unblinking, as if anticipating the confirmation of a fear he had carried unknowingly for years. Madeleine turned the pages slowly, deliberately, as if unwilling to unleash the truth all at once. "She tried to defy the house," Madeleine said. "She tried to protect the boy, to expose the cruelty, but the family, your uncle, they would not tolerate her defiance. She vanished before our eyes. The ledger records fragments, her name, the resistance, her attempts to save others, but it does not capture the full torment, the confinement, the betrayal." Auguste leaned closer, his chest tightening with fury. "You let this happen. You watched while she was erased." Madeleine flinched, voice trembling. I obeyed orders. I feared for the boy, for my own life. The family's wrath, you cannot imagine it. Belle Reeve's power, it destroys those who resist." Elise's hands shook as she traced the journal's lines. "Where is she?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Where did you hide her? Or is she dead?" Madeleine swallowed, gaze dropping to the floor. "She is alive. For many years, she was hidden away in a remote cabin under my supervision, so no one could reach her. But she vanished again. The house's influence. She disappeared into the world, leaving only shadows behind. I thought she was lost forever." The child gasped, clutching Elise, tears welling in his eyes. I remember dreams. Her voice, calling me." Auguste placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "You survived because she loved you," he said quietly. The revelation hung heavy in the air. The mother had been alive, hidden, fighting to protect her son, but Belle Reeve's reach had ensured she remained just out of grasp. Madeleine's eyes hardened. "And now you have returned. She will be found. And with that, the house, Belle Reeve, will face the reckoning it has long avoided." Lightning illuminated the chamber, casting long, jagged shadows over relics of decades of cruelty. Auguste realized the magnitude of what they had uncovered. Belle Reeve's darkest secrets were no longer buried. Its victims, its conspirators, and its legacy of terror were exposed, and the time for vengeance had come. Next, Elise and Auguste would track the mother's disappearance, uncovering her final location, and ignite a confrontation that would awaken the full, unbridled fury of Belle Reeve against those who dared defy its history. Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real persons, places, or events is purely coincidental. Chapter 18. Chasing shadows. The rain had slowed to a heavy drizzle, leaving the cypress-lined grounds slick with mud and darkness. Auguste, Elise, the child, and Lucien moved cautiously toward the carriage house, guided by fragmented memories, Madeleine's trembling instructions, and the faint hope that the mother was still alive. Belle-Rive seemed to shift around them, each gust of wind and rustle of leaves echoing the whispers of the past, as if the plantation itself were aware of their quest. The journals hinted at a cabin, Lucien said quietly, glancing nervously at the overgrown path. Remote, hidden near the edge of the bayou. That is where she was kept, away from the eyes of the family. But she may have moved or died trying to escape. His voice faltered, burdened with the weight of decades of complicity. Elise's jaw tightened. "We will find her," she said, voice resolute. The child held her hand tightly, whispering, "Mama, I remember her singing sometimes, in my dreams. She's out there." His small voice carried a hope so fragile it could shatter with the slightest storm. Auguste placed a firm hand on his shoulder, steeling himself. Belle-Rive had survived through fear, cruelty, and secrecy, but now they held knowledge, determination, and vengeance. The carriage house loomed ahead, its beams sagging, windows clouded with grime. Lightning illuminated the waterlogged wood, revealing gaps in the floorboards and the shadows of overgrown vines clutching the walls. Auguste knelt to inspect a faint trail of footprints, partially washed away by the storm but still discernible. "She moved this way," he said. "Someone led her here, or she sought refuge herself. Either way, we are close." They followed the trail toward the edge of the bayou, where cypress roots tangled like the gnarled fingers of long-dead overseers. The water reflected the grey sky, still and foreboding, as though the swamp itself conspired to hide secrets. Elise's heart pounded as every sound, frog croaks, splashing water, snapping branches, threatened to mask dangers hidden in the shadows. Suddenly, a figure appeared across a small clearing. A woman, thin, worn, yet unmistakably alive. Her hair, streaked with grey, blew in the wind, and her eyes, sharp and haunting, fixed on Elise. It was her mother. Breathless, haggard, yet determined, she stepped forward. "Elise," she whispered, voice trembling with disbelief and relief. "You came. You found me. After all these years." The child ran toward her, tears streaming, and she knelt to embrace him. The reunion was brief, but charged with emotion. Loss, love, fear, and rage intertwined in a moment suspended by decades of secrets. Auguste stepped closer, lantern illuminating the swampy terrain, aware that their reprieve was temporary. Belle-Rive's shadows were vast, and the family had returned. Madeleine's warning echoed in his mind. The house would not forgive intrusion. Victor's promise lingered. There would be consequences. And now, with the mother reunited with her child, the first spark of vengeance and reckoning was set ablaze. Next, Auguste and Elise would plan the confrontation with Victor and the family, forcing Belle-Rive's tyrants to face the consequences of decades of hatred, cruelty, and murder, and igniting a storm that would leave no secret unexposed. Chapter 19. Storm of Vengeance. The night air was electric, charged with the memory of rain, lightning, and the long shadows cast by Belle-Rive. Auguste, Elise, the child, and the mother stood in the edge of the bayou, their faces illuminated by the flickering lanterns. Each breath was heavy with anticipation, the knowledge that the family's return signaled an inevitable clash. Victor's cruelty, Madeleine's silent complicity, and the plantation's decades of terror had all led to this moment. Elise's mother pressed a trembling hand against her daughter's shoulder. "We cannot hesitate," she said. "They have protected these secrets for generations. They will not relent. If Belle-Rive has survived this long, it will strike hard and without warning." The child clutched her skirts, shivering yet resolute. His small eyes reflected the fury that had grown in Elise's heart, a fire tempered by grief and determination. Auguste surveyed the plantation from the bayou's edge. Belle Reve rose like a sentinel of darkness, its broken shutters and warped planks silhouetted against the stormlit sky. "We have the ledger," he said. "We have proof. We have her, the mother. Belle Reve's shadows can no longer hide the truth. Tonight, the family faces judgment." Lucien nodded, the weight of his years of complicity heavy on his shoulders, yet his resolve clear. From the veranda, Victor's silhouette emerged, sharp and imposing. Madeleine followed, eyes calculating, every movement precise. The storm seemed to pause, a breath held, as the two sides faced one another. Victor's voice rang out, smooth, lethal, echoing over the bayou. "So the house's ghosts have returned," he said. "You dare unearth what should remain hidden. You dare defy Belle Reve. You will pay." Elise stepped forward, the child clutching her skirts. "No," she said, voice trembling but fierce. "You have ruled through fear, Ku. Cruelty and murder for too long. The ledger, the hidden chambers, the bones, the truths you've tried to bury. They are ours now. The house cannot protect you any longer." Lightning illuminated Victor's face, revealing a mask of rage barely restrained. Madeleine's lips twisted into a thin smile, but her hands betrayed tremors. The mother stepped forward, her eyes blazing with the fury of decades denied, the love of a child lost, and the grief of lives stolen. "You failed to protect what was sacred," she said, "and now the debt is due." Auguste raised the lantern, its light cutting through the shadows. The family's threats echoed against the house, yet there was no fear, only resolve. Belle Reve's walls seemed to shiver, as if the house itself knew its secrets were exposed. Every hidden chamber, every act of cruelty, every death recorded in the ledger cried out for vengeance. Victor's hand twitched toward a pistol, Madeleine's fingers toward a hidden blade, but Auguste was faster, stepping between them, lantern swinging, voice commanding. "Tonight, Belle Reve answers for every life it has destroyed, every secret it has buried. You will not escape its reckoning." The first act of confrontation was about to unfold. A collision of generations, hatred, revenge, and survival, where the past and present would meet in violent clarity, and the shadows of Belle Reve would finally be forced into the light. Next, the struggle for vengeance, justice, and survival would erupt, determining which side of Belle Reve's dark history would endure, and which would be consumed forever. Chapter 20. Reckoning at Belle Reve. The storm had reached a ferocious pitch, rain lashing Belle Reve as if the heavens themselves sought to purge the plantation of its centuries-old sins. Auguste, Elise, the child and the mother advanced onto the veranda, lantern swinging, hearts pounding. Across from them, Victor and Madeleine stood poised, faces masks of controlled fury, weapons hidden yet implied. Every shadow of Belle Reve seemed to twist and writhe, alive with expectation. Victor's voice cut through the storm. "You think you can destroy the house's legacy? You cannot undo what Belle Reve has built over generations?" His hands flexed, eyes burning with decades of rage, fear, and obsession. Auguste's jaw tightened. "The house's legacy is one of cruelty, murder, and secrets. Tonight, it ends. The ledger, the hidden chambers, the bones, the mother alive. These truths are your reckoning." He stepped closer, the child clutching Elise's hand, while the mother's gaze fixed on Victor with a ferocity that spoke of years of suppressed vengeance. Madeleine's lips curled in a sneer. "You cannot comprehend the power Belle Reve wields. Every wall, every beam, every shadow has been complicit in maintaining its control. You will fall like those before you." Suddenly, the floor beneath Victor creaked ominously, water seeping into cracks from the storm above. Auguste's instinct screamed as lightning illuminated a weakened section of the veranda. "Careful!" he shouted. Victor's foot faltered, the boards groaned under his weight. A moment of hesitation, and the house itself seemed to choose its side. With a sharp crack, the planks gave way, plunging Victor partially through the weakened floor. Madeleine screamed, rushing forward, but Auguste's lantern cast a blinding light across her face, revealing terror where she had once held control. The mother's voice rang out, calm and lethal. "Belle Reve has betrayed you, as it always does to those who wield cruelty without conscience." The child, small but resolute, stepped forward, pointing toward the broken floor. He tried to hurt us. He tried to bury the truth." His words carried the weight of years spent in darkness, of lives stolen, of secrets finally revealed. Madeleine stumbled back, her grip on authority slipping. Auguste pressed forward, lantern illuminating the ledger now clutched in his free hand. "All of it is here," he said. "Every crime, every hidden death. Belle Reve's power cannot protect you from what you've done. Justice will be served tonight." Victor clawed at the edges of the broken boards, rage giving way to panic, the weight of decades of cruelty crushing him as the storm raged. Madeleine fell to her knees, realizing the house she had served for decades was indifferent to loyalty and cruelty alike. Belle Reve's walls were not shields for the wicked, they were witnesses. Elise stepped beside her mother, hand on the child's shoulder, lantern illuminating their determined faces. "This ends tonight," she said. The fury of years, grief and love fused into a single unstoppable force. Belle Reve had demanded obedience, but now it demanded reckoning. Lightning split the sky, thunder shook the plantation, and the first act of vengeance had been executed. Belle Reve's shadows writhed, no longer in control, as the family faced the consequences of decades of hatred, murder, and secrecy. Next, the aftermath of Belle Reve's reckoning would unfold, revealing shocking betrayals, the final fates of its tyrants, and the liberation of the plantation's darkest-held secrets.
Chapter 21. Aftermath of Shadows. The storm subsided, leaving Belle Reve drenched in the cold, silvery light of dawn. Water pooled around the veranda, reflecting the fractured image of the house, a monument to cruelty now weakened, exposed, and silent. Auguste, Elise, the child, and the mother stood together, watching Victor struggle in the wreckage of the broken floor, his face twisted in panic and disbelief. Madeleine knelt nearby, shivering with fear, eyes wide as the weight of decades of obedience and complicity crashed down upon her. Auguste turned the ledger over in his hands, its brittle pages soaked and smeared but still legible. Every hidden death, every act of cruelty, every secret once buried beneath Belle Reve was now illuminated. The plantation's power had always relied on silence, but silence had ended. Truth, for the first time in generations, had become the weapon of justice. Elise's mother stepped forward, her voice steady yet dripping with years of repressed rage. They believed the house could protect them. That fear was stronger than love, but they underestimated the lives they tried to erase. Belle Reve is not theirs to command. It belongs to the truths it conceals. Her gaze fell on the child, who trembled but stood tall. "And you, my son, have survived what no one else could endure. You are its witness, its reckoning, and its liberation." Madeleine's hands shook as she rose unsteadily, eyes darting between the ledger, the mother, and the ruined veranda. I did what I thought necessary," she murmured. "I preserved the house, the family, the legacy." Her voice trailed off, broken by guilt. The facade of loyalty she had carried for decades dissolved, leaving only a woman terrified of the consequences of her obedience. Victor's screams echoed as he was finally freed from the splintered floor, though his pride was shattered. He staggered, drenched whole head, powerless for the first time in decades. The child stepped forward, holding the small locket, a symbol of the lives Belle Reve had tried to erase. "This is for those you buried," he said softly, voice carrying the weight of generations, "and for those you could not break." Auguste placed a steadying hand on Elise's shoulder. "The house is no longer theirs," he said. "The secrets are ours. The ledger, the bones, the journals, they are witnesses now. Belle Reve can no longer hide behind fear." The mother smiled faintly at her daughter, the child, and Auguste. "We are the reckoning," she said. "The vengeance, yes, but also the restoration. Belle Reve's darkness can no longer rule. Its shadows may linger, but truth will endure." Lightning flashed one final time across the bayou, illuminating the plantation in stark clarity. The horrors of decades, the betrayal, the cruelty, the hatred, they were exposed, undeniable. The family's power had crumbled, their tyranny ended, and the house that had demanded obedience now bore witness to justice. Next, the final chapter would reveal the ultimate fates of Victor and Madeleine, the full liberation of Belle Reve, and the hope that the plantation's darkest secrets could finally rest in peace, leaving only memory, vengeance, and the resilience of those who had survived. Chapter 22. Liberation of Belle Reve. Dawn broke over Belle Reve, pale light spilling across the drenched grounds, illuminating a plantation transformed. Victor sat on the ruined veranda, defeated, his hands bloodied and trembling. Madeleine crouched beside him, tears streaking her face, the weight of her obedience and complicity pressing her into silence. The house itself seemed quieter, as if it too were exhaling after centuries of terror. Auguste stepped forward, lantern now extinguished, hands free to guide the child and Elise. "It is over," he said firmly, voice carrying across the soaked grounds. "Belle Reve no longer serves fear, cruelty, or secrecy. Its darkness ends here." The ledger, soaked but intact, rested in his other hand, a testament to crimes once buried and now revealed. Elise knelt, gathering the child into her arms. "You survived what no one should endure," she whispered, "and because of that, we have reclaimed what was stolen. Our mother, our truth, and our lives. The house cannot take that from us." The mother hugged her son fiercely, tears mingling with the rain, grief and relief etched into every line of her face. "You are the living memory of what Belle Reve tried to erase," she said, "and now it cannot." Victor's eyes glimmered with a mix of hatred and disbelief. You have no idea what you've unleashed," he muttered, voice cracked. But Auguste understood. Belle Reve's power had always been rooted in fear, with its secrets exposed and its victims standing alive and defiant. The house's shadow over them had finally been broken. Madeleine's hands fell to her sides. "I see it now," she whispered, voice small and shattered. "The obedience I clung to. It protected nothing but illusion. All this cruelty, all these deaths, for nothing. Belle Reve demands no more loyalty from me." She rose slowly, eyes hollow, finally understanding the cost of complicity. The child pressed the locket against his chest, eyes wide as he looked at the ruined plantation. It can never hurt anyone else," he whispered. His voice, small but unwavering, carried the weight of generations, a symbol that the vengeance of Belle Reve's past would no longer control the present. Auguste surveyed the estate. The hidden chambers, the broken floors, the remnants of cruelty, everything had been revealed. Belle Reve's secrets were now exposed, its tyranny ended, and the lives it had sought to erase had endured. For the first time in over a century, the plantation was free from the grip of hatred, fear, and concealment. Elise held her mother's hand, the child between them. "Belle Reve will remember," she said softly, "but it will no longer rule. Our truth, our courage, and our vengeance have reclaimed it." The sky brightened and the rain ceased, leaving the plantation drenched but cleansed, a new chapter beginning where the shadows of the past could no longer dominate. Victor and Madeleine were left to face the consequences of decades of cruelty, powerless as Belle Reve's darkness receded, leaving memory, revelation, and justice in its wake. The child, once hidden, now stood at the heart of the estate, a living testament to survival, love, and the enduring power of truth. Belle Reve had demanded obedience, hatred, and silence for generations. Now it demanded reckoning. And at last, reckoning had arrived. The plantation's shadows had been broken, and its victims could finally breathe.